Diddy is behind bars and will likely be for quite some time. Bail has been denied. Bond has been denied. He is sitting there because, well, he's frankly a flight risk and he has a lot of money to get out of the country without a passport if he wanted to. So I think his days are well, the numbered days are done. He's now behind bars. Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author, joining me to discuss. I don't know if you saw this earlier in the week. It was literally the afternoon before he was arrested. And there's a picture of him in Central Park, just sitting there on one of the hills overlooking people picnicking, playing out in the big green space. And he's just kind of sitting there looking over the city. And you got the skyline right there on the edge of the park. And you can tell he's just kind of reflecting of, knowing this is it. Because according to his attorneys, they knew that he was going to turn himself in or be arrested, and that this was the very end of a legacy. What do you make of that? Do you think he's kind of come to terms that the walls have closed in?
I would imagine at this point, behind bars, he's accepting it and probably incredibly depressed. He's obviously sexual sadist, a psychopath, narcissistic, off the chart. And folks like that, there's a term, common term, it's not a diagnosis, but the narcissistic collapse they have when they have the fatal blow to their ego that they thought they were going to always slide through life, getting away with manipulation and abusing other people. And at some point, for some of them, there's a reckoning, and he's overdue for it.
I mean, with all of those traits, and obviously his attorney doing this attorney job, saying, "Oh, it's he's innocent of all the charges." It's like there's video. I'm sorry, it's not.
Yeah.
Um, but with that narcissistic collapse, he has been put on suicide watch as of this video recording. Is that something they do pretty much with anyone who's basically having their world completely collapse around them, or are there certain signs that they look for in an individual to say, yeah, this one needs to be on suicide watch?
I think they look for certain signs. There's probably a profile of behavior that the staff look for, and also with a high status individual, I think they don't want to be accused of, like the whole Epstein thing, where they weren't. Whatever people believe about it, because people go in all
Yeah.
kinds of directions about it, but supposedly the guards were not watching him, and that's what happened. And I think nobody wants to be accused of not monitoring well.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. I mean, it's like two different uh, areas of money here, though. But Diddy is money, is Hollywood, is the music industry. Epstein was money, politics, world leaders, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, yeah, there's plenty of people that have argued that Epstein did not kill himself; he was
Yeah.
killed, so he couldn't talk about people he was involved in.
Yeah.
Do you think we're in that sort of level of danger with Diddy? Obviously, there's a lot of people out there who probably don't want information that he has to get out.
Yeah, I tend to lean away from conspiracy theories, but
Mhm,
I can respect that other people see them where maybe I don't see them.
mhm,
So I would not think so.
mhm.
But I don't really think I think Epstein probably did kill himself just because of that
Yeah,
narcissistic collapse again. It's like somebody that thought he was
yeah.
gonna get away with it forever because he had gotten away with it for so long.
Well, let's take the conspiracy out of it with Diddy. Let's just say he's depressed. I mean, this has got to be. I mean, his entire world is done. It's over. There is going to be no lasting legacy of positivity here. I mean, that is quite a blow to someone who is always believing that they're amazing. I mean, that's got to be a dark place that he's in right
Yeah, very dark. And it would not surprise me if there was a suicide attempt at some point,
now. Mhm.
just because the ego has been busted. It's like, everything that this myth that you've tried to spread about yourself, people aren't going to buy it anymore.
So what do they do when someone's on suicide watch? I mean, obviously, you wouldn't want them to have things that they could possibly harm themselves with. Bit more supervision, but what's been taken away from him? What is he living in right now with that extra level of security being put on top of him?
Yeah, yeah, anything that's, possible that they could harm themselves. And again, I think it differs from prison to prison, but sometimes it's, every 15 minutes, a guard observes, what are they up to? What are they doing? Everything is documented. Sometimes it's not that frequently. But I have seen in county jails, they're basically sleeping without any blankets or sheets. Sometimes they have a covering over them to
Mhm.
keep them from being too cold, but anything, because people can hang themselves with sheets, and so anything that they could potentially hurt themselves, shoelaces, sheets, blankets, anything that they could use is removed. So he could be very uncomfortable right now.
I mean, talk about just a level of almost dehumanization from where he was. I mean, clothing too. I would imagine he could get naked and use
Yeah,
his clothes if he
yeah,
wanted to try and attach it to something. I imagine there.
exactly.
I mean, the Epstein obviously did it with a sheet, um, but yeah, that's got to be a complicated thing to put someone in a situation like that to not give them some sort of way of figuring out a way to harm themselves, but ultimately, I'm sure if they're going to try, they're going to try. There's
Yeah.
a new book that is coming out, and this is allegedly the words of Kim Porter. Kim Porter was his wife, or his very serious girlfriend for a long period of time, the mother of several of his children. It's supposedly a tell-all that talks about. It's only 60 pages. Apparently, she only had like 60 pages in the diary talking about um, her life and what life was like with Diddy. There's allegations in there of abuse, of bizarre sexual trysts, of pretty much everything we know about Diddy. Um, again, this is her speaking from the grave. Essentially, somebody close to her claims that they had the copy of this, and now it is being published. Are you at all surprised by this? That the woman that he was supposedly very close to, this would have been before Cassie Ventura, basically has the same story.
Yeah, not surprised at all. I think this is his way of moving through the world, is to abuse other people, and particularly women. And that's, I think, what makes him, I add the layer on him of sadism. This is a guy that really liked to inflict pain on other people and felt a sense of power from it. And that's horrifying.
Yeah. He in some of the arrest affidavits the other day, the charging documents, it talks about arson. It talks about physical violence against others. It doesn't go into any sort of detail. And I remember in the press conference, they also said that they couldn't comment on that part during the active investigation. But it truly shows, right there, without exact detail, not afraid to go there, not afraid to harm people. Given that
Mhm.
she died in a rather bizarre circumstance. It was pneumonia. She was fairly young, fairly healthy otherwise. She was getting sick of him. She was ready to leave. Um, does that need to have another look taken at it? Because now that we know more context to this story, I'm wondering how much that was just glossed over at the time.
Yeah, yeah. And what other factors, if you do an autopsy and maybe look a little closer, we see plenty of those kind of cases, where it's not looked at very closely, and then they exhume the body later and find that there's another layer of information that they glean, that somebody did contribute in some way to it.
Let's talk about the reaction from other famous friends of Diddy. There's been obviously he's been out there for years, so there's many of them. Some very very well known, and I'm not associating or saying that these people did have anything to do with them in terms of his deviant acts, but a lot of them are being very very silent right now and not really saying a word. Um, from a psychological standpoint, what would you expect from friends of him if they were truly shocked to find out, "Oh my god, he did all these things and I had no idea," versus someone who did have some knowledge. Maybe not part of it, but had the knowledge.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine, with the guy was so flagrant with these parties and things that he was doing, and people talk about stuff like that. So it's hard to imagine that there are people involved with him at all that didn't have at least a sense of it.
Mhm.
And at this point, that makes them look very bad, particularly if they're not saying anything and, trying to just sweep it under the rug. We see that a lot with famous people, but it doesn't look good for any of them.
I mean, is there anything to be gleaned by the silence of them? I mean, could it just be they're in shock too, or they just don't want to get involved or have? Because one person says something, there's going to be a ton of attention on who's ever saying whatever is saying, especially if it was an associate of his, and just saying something doesn't necessarily mean there's a connection. But is there some danger in someone saying something of not condoning this, saying how horrible it is, a statement of that nature.
Mhm.
If in fact they did have knowledge, or it could come back out later down the road that they did know about this, or even worse, if they participated.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another one we did see with Epstein a lot. A lot of famous people, including politicians, had mixed with him.
Hmm.
And there's continued debate on how many people were involved or how many people at least knew. But I imagine if you were in that category, kind of a frozen silence, with not knowing how in the world do I handle this
Hmm.
it is maybe what we're seeing, that they're just sort of hoping that people don't pay any attention to them
Yeah.
and that it goes away.
It's going to be very interesting to see where that goes, who has been talked to with the grand jury, who is making deals right now,
Yeah.
and where that all lands. Because I would imagine there's a lot of people in that circle.
Yep. It's a awful, awful thing, and it's too bad it went on this long.
Yeah. Well, finally done. And hopefully, if there's more involved, they can make some stops to it. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.